Hello, and welcome to the SafeStart orientation. SafeStart is a core component of our company's overall health and safety management system. All full-time employees are expected to participate in comprehensive SafeStart training sessions. This short orientation module is designed to familiarize you with the basic SafeStart concepts, language, and techniques you will hear and see your new coworkers using daily on the job. In this short video, you will be introduced to Larry Wilson, the SafeStart author, and learn about some of its basic concepts and techniques.
Hi, I'm Larry Wilson, and I've been talking to people about personal safety as opposed to safety engineering for 25 years. Now, when I started out, I wasn't very old, and as you can imagine, I didn't know very much. So I used to ask people lots of questions instead of just telling them what to do or giving them advice that they probably wouldn't take anyway, because for some of them, their kids were the same age as me. But one of the questions I asked was, what's the most dangerous thing you've ever done? Which was quickly followed up with, and what's the worst injury you've ever had? And what really surprised me back then was that most of the time, their worst injuries didn't come from the most dangerous things they had ever done, which was kind of the party line at the time, but rather their worst injuries came from the things that they no longer perceived to be dangerous, that they had done many, many times. So, after talking to about 20,000 people over the next 10 years or so, I began to notice a pattern that was consistent with almost every accidental or unintentional injury that had happened on every one of these people, including me. And the pattern wasn't very complicated either. These four states, rushing, frustration, fatigue, and complacency, had caused or contributed to one or more of these four critical errors. Eyes not on task, mind not on task, moving into or being in the line of fire, or somehow losing your balance, traction, or grip. And because all of us have to deal with rushing, frustration, fatigue, or complacency on pretty much a daily basis, SafeStart isn't about the bizarre injuries that you see on TV or you read about in the newspapers. SafeStart is about the injuries that have happened to almost every one of us, like standing up and banging your head on something, cutting yourself with a knife or razor, slipping or falling in the bathroom or shower, punching or kicking an inanimate object, slamming a hand or finger in a car door, blowing right through a stop sign or a red light that you honestly didn't see, burning your hand, wrenching your back or straining your shoulder, falling into something or onto something hard or sharp, falling down the stairs, or falling asleep at the wheel. Most of the time, the injuries from these critical errors aren't serious, but sometimes, if there's enough hazardous energy around, they are.
Let's quickly review the SafeStart injury risk pattern. Basically, the pattern can be explained this way. When people are in one or a combination of these states, in a rush, frustrated, overly tired or fatigued, or over a long period of time have become very used to the hazards or complacent with them. When people experience one or more of these states, they are much more likely to make one or a combination of these unintentional injury-causing errors. They take their eyes off task, their mind off task. They stop looking for or thinking about where hazardous energy might be coming from, or in SafeStart terminology, they stop looking for the line of fire. Or they become much less aware of things that could cause them to lose their balance, traction, or grip. And whenever this combination of states leading to errors is present, it always takes a less risky situation and dramatically increases the potential for every level of injury risk, more major injuries, more minor injuries, and more close calls. Statistically, this state-to-error risk pattern is involved in over 95% of all accidental acute injuries. Let's take a closer look at the SafeStart states that lead to injury-causing errors. We'll start at the top of the SafeStart card with rushing. Well, when you exceed the comfortable pace at which you normally perform the task, whether it's while working, driving, walking, or running, lifting or moving, or if you are trying to do too many things at once, that's rushing. Frustration can be caused by many factors, such as relationships with people inside or outside of the workplace, malfunctioning equipment, inadequate tools for the job, conflicting work objectives and pressures, to name just a few examples. Fatigue can lead to many avoidable injuries when we become too tired, either physically or mentally, to do the job safely. This includes being too tired to react quickly, and in situations where fatigue makes prolonged concentration more difficult. Complacency becomes a problem when we are familiar enough with the hazards to become considerably less concerned with them over time. Complacency can contribute significantly to not watching or thinking about what you are doing, or in SafeStart terminology, complacency leads directly to mind and eyes not on task. Now let's take a closer look at the SafeStart critical errors. Eyes not on task. This can be as simple as not looking where you're going or what's coming at you. It also includes not moving your eyes before moving your body, or not being able to see where you're stepping, where your hands are reaching into, and so on. Mind not on task can be defined as not concentrating on the job and being unaware of dangers or deficiencies. Mind not on task leads to problems such as forgetting things, making more errors than normal, going on autopilot, and drifting away. Line of fire. This becomes a problem when you're not conscious of or don't think to look for where you are or where you're going in relation to the direction of the hazardous energy. Avoiding injuries can include making sure proper protection barriers are in place and wearing appropriate personal protective equipment, such as safety glasses, if line of fire cannot be predicted accurately. Balance, traction, grip. This critical error category can affect you when you do something that could cause you to lose your balance, traction, or grip. Injury problems can result from not wearing good footwear or gloves, not having a good grip in the first place, or not seeing or thinking about balance, traction, or grip hazards. Take a moment to think about how this pattern has affected you personally. The SafeStart state-to-error pattern is involved in almost all unintentional injuries, well over 95%. Can you think of a time you've been hurt or had a close call when at least one of the SafeStart states or errors was a contributing factor? Almost everyone has lots of examples from their past injuries and close calls. Now, can you think of a time you've been hurt, not including deliberate risk activities such as sports or while involved in military combat, when one of the states or errors was not a contributing factor? Most people have very few or even no examples for their entire lifetime. We're lucky we haven't become a statistic. Most of the time, the injuries caused by these state-to-error patterns aren't serious. Most, in fact, are just close calls. But sometimes, if there is enough hazardous energy around when we make one of these errors, it can be very serious, or even fatal. Of course, not all accidental injuries are caused by our own unintentional errors and mistakes, but all of them do result from unexpected events. And if you stop to think about it, there are really only three sources of the unexpected. Either we do something unexpectedly, like tripping on a flight of stairs and injuring ourselves in the resulting fall. In SafeStart terminology, we refer to these unintentional errors as occurring in the self area. A second possibility is that someone else, or the other guy, does something unexpectedly that causes our injury. A common example might be the driver of another car who misses the red light, perhaps because they're texting while driving, and a collision occurs as we drive, legally on the green light, through the intersection. As a result of the impact, we are injured and need to visit the doctor for stitches. The last possibility is that the tools we are working with or the equipment we are working near does something unexpectedly and this equipment failure results in injury. Examples of these types of unexpected equipment failure events could include a traffic light malfunctioning, a coupling failing, or a hose bursting. However, even though there are three main categories of unexpected events that can result in injury, that doesn't mean that all three categories are equally likely to occur. Primary equipment failure resulting in injuries is typically involved in less than 5% of the overall injuries that occur. And if you exclude activities like contact sports and military combat, where the other guy might actually be trying to hurt you, then that category is also quite small. For most people, less than 10% of their lifetime injuries. For almost everyone, the vast majority of their injuries so far this lifetime have been a consequence of something unexpected that occurred in the self area. Almost all of these self-area injuries are the direct result of the SafeStart states: rushing, frustration, fatigue, and complacency, leading to unintentional injury-causing errors, eyes not on task, mind not on task, being in the line of fire, or somehow losing our balance, traction, or grip. Listen and watch as Alex Stanley tells his SafeStart story. See if you can pick out the states and errors involved in his injury.
Hi, my name is Alex Stanley and I'm a warehouse manager for an AC parts firm. My story happened about 1.5 years ago. Early one morning, my wife calls me up at work and we started to argue. It was actually an extension from the argument the night before. So needless to say, when I hung up the phone, I was a little bit angry, a little bit distraught, and decided to take a break and go out onto the floor and see what was happening on the floor. As I'm putting my PPE on, I get a text, and it's from my wife, and it just sends me over the edge. I'm walking out on the floor, and I come a little close to a row of boxes that were just a little stacked a little too high. I'm not really looking to my side, and as I step out into that row of boxes, bam, Charlie is right there with a fully loaded forklift, and he ran right into me. Just throws me to the ground. Luckily, I had my hard hat on, so I only had a mild concussion, but I did sprain my wrist, and I had 3 green fractures in my ribs over here. And that kept me out of work for 3 weeks. It could have been a lot worse. I mean, if Charlie had been going any faster, he could have dragged me. He could have run over me, all because I wasn't paying attention to my surroundings.
Now, let's hear Emerald Harmon's story.
Hello, my name is Emerald Harmon and I am a martial arts instructor. In my line of work, there's always the possibility of injury or injuring someone else. However, my story was not in the school, it was at a grocery store parking lot. I was on my way to work and I had a couple minutes to spare, so I went to the store to get some groceries. That way I wouldn't have to go after class late at night, I could just go straight home. I was waiting in line and the line took longer than I expected, and I looked at the time and I was running a little late. I was also a little irritated because the cashier, I believe, misranked some of my items, but because I needed to go, I didn't have time to call her out on it. So I just picked up my receipt and I left the grocery store. As I was walking out into the parking lot, I was looking at the receipt, trying to do the math in my head. There was a truck that was pulling out and I obviously did not see it because I was so concerned with doing the math in my head, looking at the receipt. It backed straight into my cart and my groceries went flying. This incident could have been so much worse. If I had not been pushing that cart, that truck could have hit me. I could have hit my head on the concrete, I could have had a concussion, busted my head open, I could have been run over. I was fortunate that it did hit my cart and not me, and the only things that were really affected were my groceries. And I was still late for class.
The SafeStart state-to-error risk pattern affects all of us. Everything we do has a certain amount of risk involved. The risk increases if we are in one or more of the SafeStart states. The SafeStart states can cause or contribute to making one or more critical errors, which also increase risk. The SafeStart critical error reduction techniques are used to help lower this elevated risk. The purpose of SafeStart is to help people avoid the pattern's negative results by teaching them to use SafeStart's 4 critical error reduction techniques, or CERTs, everywhere, at home, at work, and on the road. You will learn much more about using the CERTs when you participate in comprehensive SafeStart training. In this short video, Larry Wilson briefly introduces the critical error reduction techniques, or CERTs.
It's hard to imagine not being in a rush, tired, or frustrated at least once a day, let alone for several days, even when you're on vacation. So most people get lots of opportunity to practice the self-trigger technique. But the self-trigger technique is hard to use for complacency because complacency happens gradually over time, which makes it hard to recognize or to self-trigger on. One of the reasons we get complacent is because after a while we get used to it, whatever it is, and it doesn't scare us as much as it did in the first place. And eventually we get to a point where the fear is no longer preoccupying and your mind can wander. But when we're not thinking about what we're doing, our behavior will be what we do normally or automatically or habitually, which is why it's so important to put some effort into those safety-related habits. However, it's always better if you're actually thinking about what you're doing instead of just relying on your habits and reflexes, because unfortunately, your habits and reflexes alone don't give you the ability to anticipate a dangerous situation that's about to occur and take yourself completely out of the line of fire. Every time you see one of these state-to-error risk patterns, it automatically makes you think more about what you're doing at the moment. And that really helps to fight complacency leading to mind not on task. And finally, we need to learn from all the little mistakes when the learning was free, instead of agonizing over the big ones. So every time you bump, bang, scrape into something or momentarily lose your balance, we want you to think, okay, was this a state like rushing, frustration, or fatigue that I didn't self-trigger on quickly enough? Or if it was complacency leading to mind not on task, then it's probably a safety-related habit that still needs a bit more work, or you've got to put a bit more effort into observing other people for those state-to-error risk patterns. And these 4 techniques, this is really what SafeStart is about. Learning these 4 critical error reduction techniques well enough so you can use them in real time. Which means that if you're driving 60 miles an hour or 100 kilometers an hour, then split seconds count. Because you're traveling 88 feet a second or 27.7 meters a second. So, like I said before, it's really all about learning the 4 critical error reduction techniques.
Here's something to practice. Please use one of the CERT practice cards to record what you see or experience that matches the SafeStart state-to-error risk pattern you've just been introduced to. Briefly write down what risk pattern you saw. Say, for example, that later today, as you drive home, you begin to overtake another car that keeps weaving in and out of their lane. As you begin to pass this car, you notice that the driver is texting on their cell phone, an obvious form of multitasking rushing. We want to know who and where, as well as the states and errors. Just check the appropriate boxes. When you have completed one of the cards, bring it to your safety training supervisor. This concludes the SafeStart orientation. Please take the SafeStart cards you have received today with you so that you can use and refer to them later. Thank you very much for your time and attention.